So I'm going to do something really ambitious. I'm going to do a 45-minute presentation in 15 minutes, which has been attempted here and failed, I'm sure. Those of you who don't know Inkling, quick background. We are 3 years old, a startup here in San Francisco, about 100 people, and growing really quickly. Our catalog, our team, our revenue. And we started the company thinking about textbooks and the problem of how to solve for textbooks on devices like iPad, but we've since come a long way in our thinking and the things that we worry about. And you'll see over the coming months, we're going to be releasing trade content, stuff that obviously the general consumer is interested in, really sexy stuff about beer tasting and traveling to Greece, if Greece still exists in a few months. The story I want to talk about today is really about discovery, but to give you context of how content discovery really ought to happen in our vision, I need to give you some context about how we think about products in general. And every single product needs three things. Every product needs a way to be built, every product needs a way to be distributed, and then of course, every product needs a way to be used. So if you think about something like the iPhone 5, they're built by an unbelievable number of people in Shenzhen, in China. Then there are barges that ship those over, but more importantly, there are retail stores to distribute those things. And then at the end of it, we all know how to use it. We use iOS, we use our thumbs. There's an interface for actually accessing the features of that product. So every single product needs these three things. And I like to take the $10 text file, the thing that we today call an ebook, and use it as an example. Let's run it through this filter. How are they built? How are they distributed? And how are they used? Well, you all know the ubiquitous text file and how it has become synonymous with ebooks. If you're lucky, there's a little bit more than a text file there, but most of the time it's something very, very simple. And it's not just Kindle, right? It's everywhere. It's on Nook, it's iBooks, it's ReadMill, it's all of the platforms that take this content, this commercial content, and present it. And it's also available, of course, on the web and the cloud reader. So there are a lot of different ways to access these files, but we're capable of much more. Now, how are they built? Well, here's how they're built today. This is an XML editor, and for the most part, if you're doing anything sophisticated with XML and with book building, you're working in tools like this. But the reality is, it's not you guys, it's folks overseas who are actually sitting there manually correcting for the errors. So every product needs a way to be built, and here is how we build ebooks today. Every product needs a way to be distributed, and here is Amazon. Gorgeous, easy to navigate, easy to digest. It's a very effective distribution channel because people show up here every single day, and you know what? There's no need for distribution innovation here because if you already have tens of millions of unique eyeballs showing up, you kind of get away with the brute force approach. And you know who suffers? Publishers and people who own content suffer, but that's okay because the distribution happens. And how do you use content? Well, a way to use it, yes, Amazon and iBooks provide a very straightforward infrastructure for using the content. And everybody knows how to do it. Just swipe, and you swipe, and you swipe, and you go from page to page. And it's relatively straightforward from a user interface perspective. But to us, this is just barely good enough. And the reason it's just barely good enough is because when Amazon first tackled this problem, like everything in the culture at that company, it was all about scale. And that's terrific. It has helped them build a massive business, but scale doesn't always solve the meaningful problems. So you've all seen books with errant hyphenation. You've all come across problems in content with tables that are maligned or images that are truncated. There's a lot of problems with the way that the ebook has come into existence, driven largely by the desire to scale it as quickly as possible and once again sell the $10 text file. So I just went and randomly grabbed Ukulele for Dummies content out of my Kindle, and just by snapping a shot of any old screen, I was able to pick out tons and tons of errors. Gremlins rendered as black boxes, typesetting and leading errors, indentation errors, a truncated image. This was a 2-minute effort to find this level of errors in something as simple as Dummies content. So to us, this is not something a publisher is proud of or should be proud of. In fact, they're not. They're much more proud of their print product than they are of their digital product. So the implications of that kind of a product are pretty serious. Number one, and perhaps the most important, is that no one really trusts that content. So if you're a doctor and you're using Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine to reference the dosing schedule for somebody who needs to get some Valium, and whoops, we accidentally left out that decimal point. Dead patient. If you're going to learn how to play the guitar and you don't trust the fret notation and everything sounds wrong, you're just going to default to something that you can trust, which is typically the print product. There are all kinds of implications for what happens when you build content at scale at the cost of all else. So how big is the market that the text file addresses? The $10 text file actually addresses a very small segment of the overall publishing industry. So we think about this is ebooks. $2.1 billion is an astronomically large number for this kind of product, right? Astronomically large, and has happened really, really quickly. But if you look at the total trade market in terms of print and digital, we're still not consuming a whole bunch of that content in digital. And if you take publishing as a whole, it's here. Now, this is just the US market. What happens if we toss in the global market? Well, then you get this. So why is it that we all think about ebooks as synonymous with a Kindle device, and not necessarily the people in this room, but certainly the broader consumer audience thinks about an ebook as a Kindle file? But that is a tiny, tiny smidgen of publishing where we use paper. And at Inkling, we think every day about how we can get the other $127.9 billion worth of value in this content over into a digital format. And it covers some pretty interesting and exciting categories. What is a photography book on a Kindle device? It's actually really depressing to try and consume that content, not just on an e-ink device, but even just in the text file with a bunch of pictures smushed into it. You've all experienced it, and I think a lot of you are familiar with the challenges that exist, especially the people on the outer edges here. They definitely get it. Now, I'm not going to talk about iBook's author, only to acknowledge that it exists and is tackling this problem in its own way. It is iPad only. We think that fixed layout is cheating. Single computer composition of content is silly, and no one builds books alone. It's not discoverable. In general, it's iMovie for book composition, and what we really need is Final Cut Pro. And at Inkling, we've been busy building Inkling Habitat, but that's also not something I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on today. It's a pretty cool project that has a really large logo that my iPad took a long time to render when I swiped on my presentation device. This is going to be really cool, and I can't wait to show it to you, not yet. The thing that I do want to talk about is discovery and content discovery, which is, at its heart, the fundamental reason that no innovation is really happening on the commercial side at Amazon and at Apple in big, meaty ebook problems. Because if you build something really cool but nobody can discover it, then it's not really there. And if you are the dominant player from a discoverability standpoint, everybody comes to you first, then you kind of have no impetus to innovate. So the problem for us is not about finding a book in a bookstore, not about finding 50 Shades of Grey in Amazon. The problem is finding information in the world at large. So it's not about finding something as small as 50 Shades of Grey or Ukulele for Dummies. It's actually about finding the little piece of information inside Ukulele for Dummies, not in Amazon, but in the world at large. So a much smaller thing to look for in a much, much bigger context than just a book in a bookstore. So how do people find information today? When you're looking to learn how to play the ukulele, when you're looking for information about the surface anatomy of the human skull, you do not go to Amazon. You do not go to iBooks. You go to Google. And you type in a search. The problem is that when you type in a search for something like how to play the ukulele, you get stuff like this. So if I tap on that first link, you get this page, and that ain't it. That's just not good enough. So you kind of read it, you're like, whatever. You hit back. You look at a YouTube video of a grown man sitting on his mother's bed in his bedroom. This is literally the top hit on YouTube for how to play the ukulele. And he gives you a great sense of how to play the ukulele, but if you're really taking it seriously, it's not really sufficient. And then you go to WikiHow, and this is content that was not built for you to learn how to play the ukulele. This is content that was built for you to find it on Google, right? So this stuff's imperfect, and then I found a PDF, and the list goes on. What if I'm looking for something not how-to, because that's sort of cliche, but what if I'm looking for the surface anatomy of the human head? Well, I can look at Google Images, and I can get all kinds of stuff, some of which is trustworthy, some of which isn't. I can find a Bartleby book from 1918, but But the reality is that there is no book content in Google's index. So books are where commercial content goes to live and breathe and be monetized. And yet the world's largest search engine, the machine that helps us find information, has no access to any of that content. And there are tons of reasons why that's the case that are very difficult, each in their own way, to solve for. If you want to appear in Google search results, you have to have the ability to access that content directly within your web browser with a single click without a login barrier. That's actually really tough to pull off from a technical standpoint. It's tough to pull off from a contractual standpoint. And then you have to be able to have that content in an object-oriented structure. You have to be able to turn over not just Ukulele for Dummies, but if you're asking about a long-tail question like how to strum the blues, you need to be able to return that piece of content. And that means that the computer needs to know how to interpret the structure of the content. And in books today, that can't happen. In most ebook files, the structure's not there. And you have to have content that's relevant to searches. There's a ton of computer science and business prerequisites that have to fall into place for anyone to ever find a book in a Google search result, and that's why you almost never find books in Google search results. So here's what you get if you search for the surface anatomy of human heads in Inkling. You get something really beautiful. You get a nice nav tree on the left-hand side, all of it hierarchically structured, gorgeous, trustworthy commercial content. And as of yesterday, if you look for content on Inkling that you don't own, you get this, which is that we take away the nav on the left-hand side, but we still show you the content and offer you the opportunity to buy it. And in fact, we let you click on things to explore the content before you get a paywall. And all of those prerequisites I talked about is what we've been working on for the last 3 years at Inkling. The contracts, the technology, the content production, scaling it all. It's been really, really difficult, but it's gotten us to the point where now, and only as of yesterday, people can actually start to see some of this content when they come in from Google or from a Twitter share. Now, that in and of itself is kind of cool, but what's really significant about this are the implications for the industry. Because when content can be discovered directly from Google, then you don't need to be frustrated by the yucky YouTube video or the useless web page before you ultimately make your way down the list to find the Amazon result, where you click from Google to Amazon, discover content, and give Amazon your money. Because now when you search for something, you can find a satisfying result at the very beginning, and Amazon doesn't matter anymore. So Amazon won't get as many frustrated Google users, and that means that now users can choose the formats that are interesting to them because they have a fighting chance of discovering them on Google. And every single time you click on a link in Google and don't hit the back button, that's a vote. It's a vote in favor of that content, and Google pays attention to it. And that means that the best formats and the best content make their way up the PageRank list to become the #1 result for a given query, and that format won, and it's not Amazon, and it's not Apple. So we think that this has a chance at taking all of the ideas and notions of what people in this room and people at Inkling believe beautiful, structured, forward-looking ebook content can be, and exposing it to people in a way that levels the playing field from an economic perspective. So for us, we're going to be launching hundreds and hundreds of new trade and professional titles as well as textbook content into the world in this structured way, where everything has a hierarchy of objects and everything can be traversed by Google's indexer and discovered by individuals looking for information. We're going to launch the Inkling Content Discovery Platform to make this something that publishers can use to tweak their content and get data back on how their content is being discovered and by whom. We're going to launch Inkling Habitat, which is the scalable production environment for building this kind of structured XML at scale by work groups around the world because it lives in the browser. It's not a cute little desktop app. And we're going to refine the model for this content in EPUB so that anybody who knows how to write an EPUB file or edit this kind of content can bring their content into and take their content out of Inkling's system, all the while benefiting from the wrapper that we've built around it. So I think I've done a fairly good job of packing that in 15 minutes, and I wanted to make sure that I could leave some time at the end for Q&A. Or just Q, or just A. Yes. The question was, are we just say yes, and you guys can just wonder what he asked me. The question was, are we using Google's first-click free method for this? So Google's first-click free rules dictate how much content a user needs to be able to see without paying before Google is willing to show your content in the search results. Today, that rule set, among other things, is that you must get at least 5 clicks in the content. We can do that because we don't structure content by chapter. We can do it because we structure content by object or by card, which means that when somebody clicks 5 links, they're not getting 5 chapters of a 10-chapter book. They're getting an image, a slide line, an assessment question, the reading card, and another picture, which is actually a reasonable amount of content to be surfacing to someone as a preview. So we can do that, but it's very difficult to do that if you're a book publisher and you don't have the modular structure of content that we have at Inkling. How much time do I have? One more question. So you want more, you're saying this one? So Inkling today is just HTML5 and a bit of XML wrapped around it to handle some of the interactive elements. So for those of you who don't know Inkling, you don't download a book as one big chunk of content. You can download individual chapters and they all live inside of a searchable context. We don't deliver video to your device unless you ask for it. We stream media to your iPhone at a different bit rate than we stream it to your iPad. So we manage services around all of the content so that the experience works, but the underlying format is just HTML with a little bit of XML around it. And for those of you who know EPUB, you also know that EPUB is just HTML with a bunch of XML around it. So we have always used that format. It's been a little bit deviant from EPUB 3. We already accept EPUB as an input. When we ship Habitat, we've said publicly that we are going to make EPUB 3 an output if you want to take EPUB content to other channels. And we're also now going to be working to make EPUB an important part of the editing workflow in the system itself. So EPUB is going to be an important standard. It is not fully sufficient to do everything that Inkling does today, but it's obviously getting better, and we can extend it. Oh, sorry, time's up. Thank you.